why we start to see it, right? And you'll be on the front end of that. You're gonna see patients constantly that are in these traps, right? And part of your job is to try to put yourself out of business. Y'all understand that, right?
Yeah.
You never will go out of business. But part of your job is to try to put yourself out of business. Part of your job is to try to slowly educate patients or get people to change some of those lifestyle behaviors before they become a bigger problem for you where you're running a code on them, or it's leading into cardiovascular issues that you have to deal with on top of the metabolic syndrome that they're going through. So all of those become critical, right? You already know, we already talked about all of this, right? So the beta cells secrete insulin and the alpha cells secrete glucagon. Type 1 diabetes is related to the beta cells, and the immune system fighting. We don't know why. The immune system recognized beta cells as being non-self. And because they recognized them as being non-self, they marked them for destruction. When they started to destroy the beta cells, you no longer had the cells that could produce the insulin. As simple as that.
It says there when energy is high and then when energy is low. Is that like energy required to work, or is it the blood sugar is high and blood sugar is low?
Okay, so ask that question again, just so I can.
Like when it says when energy is high and when energy is low, is that the energy demand, or is it when
Demand.
not the blood sugar itself?
Yeah, so well, it is the blood sugar itself, but the blood sugar is causing the issue that you have. So for example, if you have low blood sugar, what this is trying to say, when you have low blood sugar, your energy levels are also low, you're fatigued, right? And that, it's the low blood sugar, not low, it is the blood sugar that is causing the response of the islets of Langerhans to either dump insulin or dump glucose or dump glucagon. From a central nervous system standpoint, you'll feel it in the form of like fatigue or that kind of thing. That make sense? Okay. We have a glucose-insulin relationship that happens here that you just need to understand. When plasma glucose is greater than 100 milligrams per deciliter, you'll start to get a rapid rise in insulin as well. So when you eat food, and as you start to eat that food, you're going to have a spike in your insulin. This is pretty important to recognize too when we're dealing with a hypoglycemic patient, right? Because we're gonna give a hypoglycemic patient, and what's that going to do next to them?
Jack their glucose
It's
up.
gonna spike their insulin. Or it's
And
gonna,
insulin.
yeah, it's gonna spike their insulin, right? This is our problem right here. This is our main problem with why you need to be an advocate for your patient, right? Because we pop them with glucose, and as soon as we pop them with that glucose, it's gonna spike their insulin, right? When we spike their insulin, all of a sudden, what's that gonna do?
Drop their glucose.
It's gonna dump their glucose, and unfortunately, it's gonna dump their blood sugar even further, because there was the whole energy process that we just put them through by having to process that sugar to begin with, and then because we spiked their insulin, that spike in insulin will take care of the sugar we just gave them, plus that insulin will start to interact with any other sugar that they also had, and it'll dump their blood sugar even further than what it was before, right? So our goal in giving glucose is for what purpose?
To get them awake or moving enough to eat long-term sugar.
Give me a more specific, or
Can you ask the question again?
yes. Our goal in giving glucose to a hypoglycemic patient is for what specific purpose?
Get their mental stability back.
There it is. And I know you said awake. I wanted it.
Yeah, to be able to eat
So it's for
complex
the brain.
carbohydrates.
It's for
Yeah.
the brain.
Yeah.
We are trying to make sure that the brain is not going to go brain dead from a lack of nutrient, which is then going to cause a cascading effect across the rest of the body, which will eventually lead to their death, right? We're trying to get the brain to function again, because the brain needs that steady supply of glucose, right? But we have to recognize that when we just dump that sugar on them and we got their brain back into action, the body is going to have an effect on that, right? I'm so insistent on you guys understanding mechanisms of actions of drugs, not because I can't say, hey, if they've got VFib, give them amiodarone. Great, I can say that, that's fine. But you have to know what other effects are going to happen in the body as well. When you give albuterol, yes, it's going to bronchodilate. But you have to understand that it's going to have effects on what else? The heart. Even though the heart doesn't have those same receptors, it has receptors that are so closely related that excess albuterol will have an effect on the heart. So therefore, you have a person that's wheezing and can't breathe, but they're having a current cardiovascular event at the same time. You have to think very carefully on whether or not you're going to also give them that albuterol. Does that make sense? You just dump them with sugar. You are going to have the effect you want, which is to change their mental status, yes?
Yes.
But you're also going to have the effect you don't want, which is to dump their blood sugar even further, because you know that when you give sugar, you're going to spike their insulin as well. And that spike in insulin is going to do all the things that we've already discussed. It's going to bind up, or it's not going to bind up, but it's going to cause that sugar to be able to enter cells to be used, and going to cause the liver to start storing more of it, and some in adipose tissue as well. Does that make sense? So we have to think a step ahead and go, okay, I just gave them the sugar. As soon as I get their mental status capable of being normal again, where they can control their own airway, I've got to have them eat something, because I need to make sure that they have a steady supply of sugar coming through. Does that make sense? And then, as an educational moment, I have to also talk to them about the fact that what's going to happen to their blood sugar readings.
They're going to be high. Is that what you mean? And so don't give them insulin?
Yeah, can you imagine? So they're trying to determine, like say they have an insulin pump, and they're trying to pump their insulin based on readings of blood sugar. But I'm doing stuff that's whacking out their blood sugar.
And they're going to adjust their pump.
And if they adjust their pump, so their own body is going to release some insulin. Now they're dealing with their pump process, but we're providing them a drug that is going to be used very quickly in their body, but it's going to have false readings of what's actually happening in their body, because we did something non-physiologic to them. We threw something at them. So it's not physiologic. So their readings are going to be off, and we need to make sure that they don't make adjustments to their normal regime based on what we just did to them for about 24 hours. Just continue your normal regime, knowing that what we just did to you is going to make a change in what your readings are going to be for a while. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, for any number of reasons, you're going to be right back at their house again. And the next time you come to their house, they're going to be a little bit worse. Okay? So we have to be really careful with what we're doing there. So we know that insulin is that facilitator that goes through the process of letting the GLUT4 transporters come in. If we decrease our blood sugar, we have a very rapid inhibition of insulin secretion. So the pancreas is very responsive to blood sugar. So if we dump blood sugar, the beta cells will immediately stop dumping insulin also. So that's important. And it'll also prevent, because we have that insulin being reduced, we won't have that storage happening in the liver either during that time. What that means is that somebody who has low blood sugar, chronically low blood sugar, will not be releasing lots of insulin, which means they will not be releasing or not be storing a lot of glycogen, which means the longer that they are chronically hypoglycemic, the more likely they will not have stores of sugar in their liver, because the liver is not storing that sugar, right? Which means they're also typically not going to be responsive to glucagon if that was a choice that we wanted to give them.
Or glucagon in their body, even. Less responsive to that.
Well, the glucagon will be released in their body because they've got low blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Questions with that? And this is just a cartoon of what we've already talked about, right? So insulin affecting an insulin receptor will cause a conformational change in that G protein. Thank you.
So thinking is some notes for me and give to me next
You bet.
Tuesday.
So we'll see this signal transduction process that I'm not making you know, right? That leads to that GLUT4 transporter actually being transmembrane. So the parts of this that you need to know. You need to know that insulin is gonna bind to a receptor that causes a signaling process, which can be altered all along the way via various things. And that the GLUT4 transporter is in the cytosol. It's in the fluid. And that signaling transduction will cause it to bind to the membrane, become transmembrane, and now glucose can interact with it, and it will facilitate its movement into that cell. That GLUT4 transporter can't bind to that cell membrane and become transmembrane, glucose can't get in the cell. I don't care how much insulin is available, right? Which means if this receptor is resistant to insulin, it doesn't matter how much glucose is there, it doesn't matter how much insulin is there, because we can't ever get that GLUT4 transporter to actually become transmembrane, so glucose can't ever enter that cell at rest.
So when you're talking about the
That rests.
insulin receptors, are the receptors just not accepting the insulin, or the insulin does bind to it, yet the receptor doesn't do anything?
The insulin won't bind to it. It doesn't recognize insulin anymore.
He doesn't fit.
That's the key, the key doesn't fit.
Correct, it's
It's
resistant
not
to
like
that
you can put
insulin.
a key in a lock and it just doesn't turn it.
Yeah, it is resistant to that insulin, so it doesn't bind to that receptor at all anymore.
You're probably gonna get to this, but how does activity create a way to get around the insulin receptor?
So I'll do that on a different class because you guys are done, but our GLUT1 transporters are not dependent on
Oh, they're
insulin.
GLUT1,
It's a
okay.
different GLUT transporter.
Okay.
It still transports glucose, but it's not dependent on insulin. The changes that our cells go through during activity cause those GLUT1 transporters to become transmembrane and pull the sugar in independently, which is why exercise is such a good thing for diabetics. It gives them a different way of being able to use that blood sugar outside of this insulin process. So as their blood sugar levels are going up and they're having a hard time controlling, if they're active, they will use a lot of that sugar in active ways and still be able to go through that process of metabolizing sugar properly, right? So they should be active. They should do exercise. Good? In addition to that, exercise will, over the course of time, reduce some of those same lifestyle problems that were leading to the resistance in the insulin to begin with. So not only does exercise improve the use of sugar, but it actually improves the receptor to not being resistant to the insulin to begin with. So it actually has several effects, and effects that we haven't talked about yet. But it has several different effects that makes diabetes less of a problem because of that exercise. Be active.
What are you constituting as exercise? Is there a heart rate?
No,
that-
excellent question. So when we talk about exercise in this context, it's actually, we're looking at, maybe 150, give or take, minutes, several times a week that you're actually being active. And when we say active, a moderately high heart rate is all we're talking about, because that'll go through the process of releasing the epinephrine and the cortisol that will lead to those activities. So I'm not talking fitness. I'm talking activity for health. That's a big difference. okay?
Walking once a day.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to get you guys all to do is fitness, right? That's health plus your ability to be fit to do the things that you want to do and to not get hurt in activities. When we talk about something like this, we're actually talking about, we're not talking about fitness, we're actually talking about health-related activity to get that heart rate just up high enough to get that sympathetic system involved. And that's not the same thing. So we're not even talking about lifestyle changes where they have to be, going to the gym every day. We're talking about, we need you to get out and walk every day, a brisk walk. We need you to get out and do things other than sitting and watching TV. That's health. That's not gonna change body image, that's not gonna change body style, that's not gonna change any of those things. It's going to change physiologically what's happening with the metabolism of sugar, right? Good? Questions there? Fantastic. Go.
We're back at 11:30.
Take a break.
What time's our lab start?
11:30.